these are just some examples of what it would look like on an EEG. The delta waves, when the delta wave dips really deep, usually deep sleep. Then, everybody's familiar with REM, the rapid eye movement, the time that you're usually dreaming, okay? And deep sleep. We know that when we're sleeping, okay, this should alternate throughout the night. Y'all have the little Fitbits that tell you?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that. Like, how does it detect that?
It's going to be mostly based on movement, because when you're in deep sleep, it's usually a time that you're not moving, okay? And some people actually have it can go into sleep paralysis. Then when they move into their REM cycle, where they're dreaming, and let's say it's a bad dream or something, they can't wake themselves up. In other words, the body doesn't wake them up. And so it's actually a very disturbing disorder. But it's based on a lot of it, the movement, which of course would be affecting the heart rate. Now, how accurate it is, I don't know, but it's fun to look at.
Is the REM, do you move in your REM sleep or not?
You can, yeah. In REM sleep, like say for example, you're dreaming that you're running from something, your legs might move.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, one of the higher order abilities of the brain is cognition. Cognition is the process by how we get and use information. We read, we look, we see stuff around us. How are we getting and using that information? When we begin to look at how we take our information and process it, okay, it's going to be involving regions of the cerebral cortex. We have a parietal association area, a temporal, and a frontal. Because when we talk about this ability right here, this ability is higher order. This ability right here is nothing to do with basic survival. This is all higher order that has developed over the geological time frame for man. The parietal, it perceives and attends to the stimuli coming in. All the stimulus. The temporal says, well, let me identify it. Is it a pain? Is it a pressure? Is it a smell? Is it a taste? Let me identify the stimulus. The frontal says, well, you know what? If that stimulus came in, I need to give a response. So let me plan it. Do I need to shift my butt in the chair? Okay? Do I need to slide over? Do I need to stand up? Do I need to recognize that taste as good or bad? Okay? So, this is what happens with higher order thinking. Now, memory, that is a cognitive function. We have to get information. We need to have some way to store it. If I store it, I need to retrieve it. And believe it or not, forgetting information is important too. I'm really good at that.
Is that like habituation, kind of?
I think it could be. And now that you've asked me that, I think it could be part of the ADD problem. You know, because they can't put out this stimuli coming in.
I'm a bachelor But it's certain information I can't forget. Is that good or bad?
Now, when you say certain information you can't forget, is it a memory or something that's like around you all the time? Or is it like, you know, birthdays, dates, times?
Like certain training, certain combat events,
It does depend on what you can.
and it's just there.
Yeah. Unfortunately,
But it doesn't affect my daily living.
right. So what has happened is that has become what is now a long-term memory, and it's there for storage. And the problem that happens is things probably remind you, like you might see something, you might hear something, you might walk past something, whatever the case might be, and it reminds you of something from that combat or the training, for example. And it doesn't have to be, because there's a difference, okay? There's a difference in what your training might be, your combat might be, and then what they term the post-traumatic, okay? Because the post-traumatic is going to be the event, and it's just like the term implies, okay? It was traumatic, all right? But see, your training might have been what should have been your training that you had, and if you used it in combat, you were ready for it. So there wasn't post-traumatic. But if there was something that happened outside of that training that you weren't prepared for, that was traumatic. And that has the emotions, the smells, the sights, the sounds that come along with it. And so therefore, when anything makes that come back up, yeah, it's going to be remembered. And it doesn't have to affect the everyday life. Yeah. But there are things that can happen that do. I lost my son very tragically 6 years ago. And when I say tragically, I mean tragically. I have PTSD from that. There are things that happen, things that I see, things that I hear, and it automatically triggers it. And I have that fear that comes up. And you do. You have to learn how to deal with that. Yeah. Now, forgetting information, like I said, just as important as remembering it. So, this area that we get, this hippocampus, part of that limbic system, it is going to be an area that's important for forming a memory. However, there's no storage of the memory. Forming a memory requires some higher order functions of your brain, okay? It can help us organize the information to get it ready for long term. However, if you do not give the brain what it needs to form the memory, it won't happen. The one thing that is needed to form a memory, sleep.
And not repetition.
Repetition is going to come into another part of the brain that's going to be, because we're going to see that we have like two types of memory. One that's more process, and then one that's declarative. Okay? Something that's a process, what you're doing is you're doing it over and over and over and over and over to the point that it is second nature, just like walking. Okay? It doesn't even require that you put thought into it. You have trained your body to respond in that way, and it will do it. For example, walking. How many of y'all remember learning how to walk? But you know how to do it, right? okay? But we know if we've been around babies learning to walk, we see them, you know, first time, and then flop right down, okay, or fall right up. Good thing diapers are soft, okay? And eventually they get better and better and better, and now we do it without even thinking about it, right? That's a processed memory.
What about reading before going to bed? Does that have any like effect on it?
Yes, if you're reading before going to bed. Now, here's the problem, okay? Most of the time, when you're reading in that fashion, where you are relaxed, okay, that is telling your brain, I don't have to process this information. The best way to read is to be uncomfortable. Sit upright, preferably nothing behind your back, okay? Use your finger to underline. Important memory forming area. And even if you don't say it out loud, say it out loud in your brain, okay? But if you read before going to bed, because of the stance that your body's in, it's telling your brain, this is not for important information. Yeah. It's amazing. Now the sleep. When I say sleep being required, sleep, this means I have to have normal sleep. At least the 6 to 8 hours. Okay? And I need to make sure that I have my cycles of sleep. Because it's in deep sleep, the connection will be made and it will be stored as a memory later for retrieval in some way. So memory is really a process to teach the cerebral cortex that you have to remember this. We store long-term memory in different areas of the brain. Facial memory, familiar objects, are in areas of the temporal lobe. Memory of plans, social roles are in areas of the frontal. Because I have to make sure that they're in the right area so that I can have the correct response. So we need to have our deep sleep. When we make a memory, sensory information comes in. The first thing we do is have short-term memory, where we only store it for a few seconds. Like if I wanted to make a phone call somewhere, but it's not a number I normally call, I'll hold it long enough to dial. That's not going to become long-term. That's going to stay short-term. But let's say I needed to start learning my areas of the brain. Well, short-term, okay, well, right now I'm putting it into short-term. But then again, I now have my hands on it. I'm saying this part is this part, is this part, is this part. I'm now making something that's going to go long-term. This is the types of memory. Is it declarative or explicit? Is it going to be something where I have to just do a procedure, walk, ride a bike, okay? Or do I actually have to recall this information? Do I need to say, okay, well, this is the longitudinal fissure. This right here is my lateral. Do I have to recall this information?
Yes.
How am I going to make this become something not only long-term memory that I can use at test time, but I can also retain it to make sense out of it for test time.
Repetitiveness.
You want me to tell you the best way to study, to learn? Okay? First of all, I don't know if y'all noticed, okay? But when I'm teaching you, number one, I'm pointing. I'm making you read. Number two, some of you write, and that is great, okay? Now here's the kicker for the writing part. You need to write in red. Why?
Lighter? Sticks out more?
Your brain picks it up.
Association?
Because of that red area in the brain.
The eyes with the optic nerve. It makes an association between what you're writing going down your arm to your hand, watching the movement you are making. And because the eyes pick up two types of red, the only color that we have that it picks up two types of, guess what it's doing? It's storing it.
What's the other color?
No, that's the only color.
Oh, so-
It's the only color that it picks up two shades of. So as you're writing, it is making something, it's triggering something else.
What's next?
Now, the other thing I do, I gesture.
When you say, I've noticed you'll like say something, you'll like say it.
I gesture. I try to make you look at something, or you guys put your hands on it. Okay? And so that's two things. That's visual and that's hearing. Okay? And the third thing I'm doing, I'm asking y'all one thing over and over and over. Why?
So we actually have to think about it.
You've got to actually, if you do not actually think about it, it has no hope in the world of history to be able to become a memory for you.
So with people who, okay, so just with the outer, or we were just talking about, the short-term and long-term, you know how you were saying it's retained for a few seconds, but you know how there's some people who can remember stuff very easily long-term, but they have no short-term memory. Like if I say,
Yeah.
hey, pick me up at 6 o'clock, and they just totally forget, but like they can read something on a piece of paper and just remember it forever.
Yeah.
So why do some people have that and some people don't?
They were more of a visual learner than an auditory.
Okay.
You told them, and it just went in. Whereas on the piece of paper, they actually held it, they saw it, they probably said it aloud in their brain. Okay, but the auditory was just simply one aspect, not three or four.
Gotcha.
Now here's what gets to happen between the neurons with the long-term memory. It actually involves synapsing of the neurons. It actually involves the release of neurotransmitters.